The day I realized my brother might have stolen my inheritance started with a single sentence from a lawyer. We are unable to locate your name in the final version of the will. At first, I thought it was a mistake. My father had told both of us many times that everything would be divided equally. Half for my brother, half for me. But according to the documents sitting on that lawyer's desk, the entire inheritance had been transferred to one person, my brother. And somehow, my name had disappeared completely. My name is Daniel. I am 34 years old, and until 2 years ago, I believed my relationship with my older brother was strong. His name is Jason. Growing up, Jason and I were close in the way many siblings are when life feels simple. We shared a room when we were children. We played sports together. We argued about small things, but nothing serious. Our father, Michael, raised us with the same philosophy. Family comes before everything. My father worked his entire life building a small construction business. It started with one truck and a handful of local projects. Over the years, he slowly expanded it into a stable company. By the time Jason and I were adults, the business supported several employees and generated enough income for my father to retire comfortably. Because of that, the subject of inheritance occasionally came up during family dinners. My father was always very clear. When I am gone, the business and everything else will belong to both of you. Those words felt reassuring. Not because Jason and I were waiting for money, but because my father valued fairness. Jason eventually joined the business full-time. He handled operations and worked closely with my father for many years. I chose a different path. I worked in finance and moved to another city. Despite living farther away, I visited regularly. Family holidays, weekend trips, birthdays. Nothing about our relationship suggested future conflict. At least, not until the year my father passed away. Losing my father was the most difficult moment our family had experienced. He passed away unexpectedly after a brief illness. The weeks that followed were filled with arrangements, paperwork, and emotional conversations with relatives. Jason handled many of the immediate responsibilities because he lived closer to my father's home. At the time, I was grateful for that. The last thing I wanted during that difficult period was to argue about legal documents. Several months later, after the emotional chaos settled, Jason called me. "We should meet with the lawyer to finalize the estate paperwork," he said. His tone sounded calm and professional. There was no tension in his voice. So I agreed without hesitation. The lawyer's office was located in a quiet building near the center of town. When I arrived, Jason was already sitting in the conference room reviewing several documents. He smiled and shook my hand. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then the lawyer entered the room carrying a folder. He opened it and began explaining the details of my father's will. At first, I listened casually, until he said something that immediately caught my attention. The entire estate has been transferred to Jason. I assumed he would continue speaking, perhaps explaining how the assets would be divided afterward. But he stopped there. Confused, I asked the obvious question. "What about my share?" The lawyer looked down at the document again. "Your name does not appear in the final version of the will." The room suddenly felt very quiet. I looked at Jason. He avoided eye contact. That moment marked the beginning of a long and uncomfortable investigation into something none of us expected. After the meeting ended, I asked Jason directly, "Did Dad change the will?" Jason shrugged slightly. "He must have," he said. But that explanation did not make sense. My father had never mentioned such a decision. And changing a will requires witnesses and legal documentation. So I asked the lawyer another question. When was this will updated? He checked the document. Approximately 3 months before your father passed away. 3 months earlier. That detail raised another concern. During that period, my father had been dealing with serious health problems. He spent most of that time recovering at home. And Jason was the person who handled nearly all of his appointments and paperwork. Suddenly, a possibility entered my mind that I did not want to consider. But curiosity pushed me forward. Over the next few weeks, I reviewed every document connected to my father's estate. Property records, business ownership forms, financial accounts, and one detail kept appearing repeatedly. The signature on the final version of the will looked slightly different from my father's usual handwriting. At first the difference seemed small, but the more I studied it, the more unusual it looked. Eventually, I spoke with the lawyer again. He agreed that the signature appeared unusual. However, he also explained something important. The witnesses listed on the will were employees from my father's company, people who worked closely with Jason. That discovery changed everything, because suddenly the situation was no longer just confusing. It was suspicious. After discussing the issue with a legal advisor, I made the difficult decision to request a formal review of the will. The investigation took several months. Handwriting experts compared the signature with older documents. Witness statements were reviewed. Financial records were examined. Eventually, the truth became clear. The final version of the will had been signed during a period when my father was heavily medicated after surgery. The witnesses had not fully understood the circumstances, and the document had been prepared under Jason's supervision. When the evidence was presented in court, the judge ruled that the will did not meet the required legal standards. The original version of the will was reinstated. The estate was divided exactly the way my father had always intended. Half for Jason, half for me. The experience changed my relationship with my brother permanently. Trust, once broken, rarely returns easily. But the situation also reminded me of something my father used to say. Money reveals character faster than anything else. In the end, the truth mattered more than the inheritance itself. Because fairness was the principle my father had always believed in. And eventually, fairness was restored. Family conflicts over inheritance happen more often than people expect. But when trust is broken between siblings, the emotional impact can last much longer than any legal dispute. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Would you fight for the truth? Or would you walk away to protect your peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy dramatic real-life stories about family conflict, hidden truths, and unexpected justice, subscribe to the channel, because the next story might surprise you even more.